What would you do if the world refused to see your worth? Imagine stepping into a space you've earned, dressed in a suit that screams success, carrying the weight of $1 billion empire, only to be told to wait outside like you don't belong. That's exactly what happened to Marcus Langston, a black CEO, on a crisp morning in San Jose. The sun glinted off his polished shoes as he arrived at a luxury hotel, ready to lead a tech summit that could redefine his company's future. But the staff? They didn't see a leader. They saw a man who didn't fit their picture of power. What happened next wasn't just a moment. It was a movement that would leave the entire hotel reeling and inspire countless others to rethink what true strength looks like. Welcome to Daily Narrated Stories, where we bring you gripping tales that challenge the way you see the world. Stories that will make you feel, think, and act. Marcus stepped out of his sleek, gray Mercedes, the engine purring softly as he adjusted the cuff of his charcoal suit. The hotel's circular driveway buzzed with early morning energy, valets darting between cars, the faint hum of city traffic in the distance, and the sharp scent of exhaust mingling with the cool air. He was early, as always, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the pavement with purpose, each step a testament to the years of hard work that had brought him here. But the valet, a young man with a distracted gaze, didn't move to take his keys. Instead, he glanced at Marcus, his eyes narrowing slightly, then turned to the car behind him. "Hey, can you park this one?" he called to a coworker, ignoring Marcus entirely, as if he were invisible. Marcus's grip on his keys tightened, the metal biting into his palm, but he parked the car himself, his jaw set, a quiet storm brewing in his chest. Inside, the hotel lobby gleamed with modern elegance, marble floors reflecting the soft glow of chandeliers, the air carrying a faint scent of lavender that did little to soothe the tension building inside him. Marcus approached the front desk, where a woman with a tight smile barely looked up, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone clipped, her eyes flicking over him with a dismissive scrutiny that felt like a slap. "Yes," Marcus replied, his voice steady, a calm facade masking the frustration beneath. "I'm here for the TechWave Summit. I believe you have the Oakwood room reserved for us." The woman's eyes scanned his face, her frown deepening, a flicker of doubt crossing her features. "Are you with one of the vendors?" she asked, her voice laced with skepticism. "No," Marcus said, his tone firm. "I'm the CEO." Her smile vanished, replaced by a cold, unyielding stare. "Right. Could you wait outside for a moment? We're still prepping the space." Marcus paused, the weight of her words sinking in like a stone, heavy and cold. "I'm also the keynote speaker," he added, his voice steady but his chest tightening, the air in the lobby suddenly feeling too thin. The woman's expression didn't change, her eyes narrowing slightly. "We're not quite ready. Please wait outside," she repeated, her voice flat, devoid of warmth. A young man in a blazer, a walkie-talkie clipped to his belt, appeared behind her, his gaze raking over Marcus with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "You with security?" he asked, lowering his voice, as if Marcus's presence needed to be whispered about. Marcus's chest tightened further, a sharp pang of frustration blooming beneath his ribs, but he kept his tone even, his composure a shield. "I'm Marcus Langston. I run the conference you're hosting today." The man tilted his head toward the door, gesturing for Marcus to step outside, his expression unreadable, a silent dismissal that cut deeper than words. "Now, put yourself in Marcus's shoes. You're standing outside the hotel, the morning air cool against your skin, the faint hum of the city a distant backdrop to the storm in your heart. You're watching as other guests, white men in suits, are greeted with handshakes and warm smiles while you're left on the pavement, your worth reduced to nothing. You've built a company from the ground up, poured your soul into every line of code, every contract, every handshake. But in this moment, none of that matters. What would you do next? Would you confront the staff head-on, demanding the respect you deserve, or would you walk away and take your business elsewhere, letting your actions speak louder than words? Share your choice in the comments below, and let's see what you do. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Daily Narrated Stories for more stories that challenge, inspire, and move you. Help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. Every single subscription means the world to us. We're working hard to share powerful, real-life stories that inspire hope, courage, and kindness. Getting to 1,000 subscribers is a huge milestone, and your support truly keeps us going. Thank you for being part of this journey. You're not just a viewer, you're family. Marcus stood just outside the hotel's glass doors, the soft hiss of them closing behind him like a whisper of rejection. It was 8:09 a.m., his speech still 51 minutes away, but time felt irrelevant now. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of exhaust from the city beyond, the coolness brushing against his skin like a reminder of his isolation. Across the street, a father adjusted his daughter's backpack as they headed to a nearby school, the little girl's laughter cutting through the tension in Marcus's chest, a sharp contrast to the storm brewing inside him. A delivery truck rumbled past, its brakes squealing, the sound jarring in the otherwise quiet morning, and for a moment, the normalcy of the scene felt like a cruel mockery of the injustice he'd just faced. He'd faced moments like this before, countless times, if he was honest, but today felt different. Today, he wasn't just a man being overlooked. He was a leader being erased, his presence reduced to an inconvenience in a space he'd paid to command. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from the spiral of his thoughts, the vibration a small jolt against his thigh. "Boss," came the voice of his assistant, Caleb, his tone bright but cautious, like he could sense something was off even through the phone. "Just checking. Did they greet you yet?" Marcus stared at the hotel doors, their glass reflecting the pale morning light, a distorted version of himself staring back, and his voice came out low, measured, each word deliberate, heavy with the weight of what had just happened. "Not exactly." Caleb paused on the other end, the silence heavy with understanding, a shared history of moments like this binding them. He'd worked with Marcus for 5 years, long enough to know that this tone, this quiet, controlled cadence, meant something serious was unfolding. "They asked me to wait outside," Marcus added, the words tasting bitter on his tongue, like a sip of coffee gone cold, the memory of the receptionist's dismissive gaze burning in his mind. Caleb's voice dropped, alert now, a protective edge creeping in, the kind of loyalty that comes from years of standing side by side. "Want me to come down?" "No," Marcus said, his gaze still fixed on the doors, his fingers tightening around the phone. "Stay with the investors. They'll be arriving soon. Let me handle this." He hung up, the click of the call ending echoing in his ears as he straightened his tie, the silk smooth under his fingers, the gesture automatic, a ritual to ground himself. But it did little to ease the tightness in his chest, the feeling of being pushed out of a space he'd earned, a space he'd built. He walked back into the lobby, the air inside warmer but no less hostile, the faint scent of lavender now cloying, suffocating. The same woman at the desk looked up, her expression unchanged, her eyes flicking over him with the same dismissive scrutiny, a look that felt like a physical weight pressing down on him. "I thought I asked you to wait outside, sir," she said, her fingers tapping the keyboard with a rhythm that grated on Marcus's nerves, each click a tiny jab at his patience, a reminder of her indifference. "And I waited," he replied, his voice calm but firm, the kind of calm that comes before a storm, a quiet strength that belied the fire burning inside him. "Now I'd like to speak with the event coordinator. My name is Marcus Langston. I'm the founder and CEO of Langston Innovations. We booked the Oakwood Room and 2 floors of your suites for this conference." Her eyes met his, but there was no apology, just a flicker of doubt, as if she thought he might be joking, or worse, lying. Her skepticism a silent accusation that cut deep. "Mr. Langston, was it?" she said, her tone skeptical as she turned to the man in the blazer, who stood nearby adjusting his walkie-talkie, his movements distracted, careless. "Can you call Sarah from events?" The man nodded and walked off, his footsteps muffled by the plush carpet, leaving Marcus to step aside as a bellhop wheeled a luggage cart past, the wheels squeaking faintly, the sound grating against the tension in the air. Marcus caught sight of 2 of his board members stepping out of the elevator, their TechWave Summit badges gleaming under the lobby's soft lighting, their laughter a stark contrast to the coldness he'd faced. They were greeted by a hotel manager who seemed to appear out of nowhere, all smiles and handshakes, his voice warm and welcoming, a performance of hospitality that Marcus had been denied. "Good to see you, gentlemen," the manager said, guiding them toward the conference wing, his arm around one of their shoulders, a gesture of camaraderie that felt like a slap to Marcus. He raised a hand to get the manager's attention, a small gesture, a quiet plea for recognition, but the manager hesitated, his eyes flicking to Marcus for a split second before turning away, leaving Marcus's gesture hanging in the air like a ghost, unseen, unacknowledged, a silent rejection that stung like a fresh wound. The dismissal pierced through him, a sharp pang that settled in his gut, a familiar ache he'd felt too many times before, but he refused to let it show, his face a mask of composure, his eyes steady, unyielding. He turned back to the desk, his voice steady but laced with steel, each word a deliberate step on a tightrope of restraint, a quiet defiance in the face of their ignorance. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm going to say this one more time. I'm not a guest. I'm not with security. I'm not delivering anything. I'm the reason these people are staying here. I organized this entire summit. I brought 60 of the most influential investors in West Coast tech into this building today." The woman opened her mouth, her lips parting as if to argue, but before she could speak, the man with the walkie-talkie returned, his expression unreadable, his eyes narrowing slightly as he looked at Marcus, a flicker of curiosity breaking through his indifference. "She's on her way," he said, then paused, his voice lowering, a hint of doubt creeping in. "You really the CEO?" Marcus gave a small, tight smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes, a smile that held years of frustration, resilience, and quiet power. "I didn't just build this company, I financed it. I wrote the first line of code. I signed the contract with this hotel. And I chose this location because I believed in the idea of professional courtesy." The silence that followed was heavy, not with disbelief, but with discomfort, the kind that seeps into a room when someone realizes they've made a grave mistake, but isn't ready to admit it, a tension that hung in the air like a storm cloud. The woman shifted, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, suddenly unsure, her earlier confidence crumbling like dry sand, her eyes darting away from Marcus's steady gaze. "I've got $5 billion under management," Marcus added, his voice low, each word a quiet hammer strike, a deliberate reminder of the power they'd overlooked, "and I almost trusted you to help grow that." The air seemed to thicken, the weight of his words pressing down on them, and for a moment, Marcus could almost feel their regret, a tangible thing hanging between them, a bitter taste in the air. Then Sarah, the event coordinator, appeared, her heels clicking briskly against the marble floor, her face a mask of professionalism that couldn't quite hide her unease, her eyes flicking between Marcus and the staff with a nervous energy. "Mr. Langston, I am so sorry for the delay," she said, clutching a folder, her voice a little too bright, a forced cheerfulness that felt hollow. "We weren't informed you'd arrived. Please, come with me. The Oakwood room is set, and coffee is being served." Marcus followed her, the staff parting like a reluctant sea, their eyes darting away as he passed, their discomfort palpable, a silent admission of their failure. He didn't speak again, he didn't need to, his silence a louder rebuke than any words could be. They hadn't seen a man trying to sneak in, they'd missed a man who owned the space, standing still, giving them a chance to correct their mistake, a chance they hadn't taken. The Oakwood room was at the back of the conference wing, past a hallway lined with modern art and plush carpeting, the walls adorned with abstract paintings in muted blues and grays, their colors a stark contrast to the fire in Marcus's chest. Inside, the lights were dimmed for the presentation, rows of chairs neatly aligned, a podium bearing the TechWave logo, the air thick with the scent of roasted coffee beans and fresh paper, a sensory reminder of the event he'd poured his heart into. Caleb was at the front, adjusting the microphone with the AV technician, his movements precise but hurried, his brow furrowed with focus, while investors trickled in, their voices a low hum over the clink of coffee cups, their laughter a distant echo in Marcus's ears. No one knew what had just happened in the lobby, and Marcus wasn't ready to tell them. Not yet. The weight of the moment still too raw, too heavy. He didn't head to the podium, his usual place of command. Instead, he slipped into a side room, a private lounge reserved for speakers, and closed the door, the click of the latch a small relief, a barrier between him and the world outside. The silence wrapped around him like a heavy coat, muffling the noise of the summit, the hum of voices fading into a distant murmur. He stood there for a moment, his hands resting on the back of a leather chair, his breathing slow and deliberate as he tried to center himself, to push down the storm of emotions threatening to break through his carefully constructed facade. The room was small but elegant, with a darkwood table, a few chairs, and a window that looked out onto a courtyard where a single tree stood, its leaves rustling in the morning breeze, their gentle swaying a quiet dance of freedom. Marcus stared at the tree, its branches moving with an effortless grace, and for a moment, he envied its simplicity, its ability to exist without justifying its presence, without fighting for its right to be seen. He pulled out his phone, his fingers steady but his mind racing, a whirlwind of thoughts he couldn't quite silence. "Lydia," he said when his head of operations answered, her voice crisp and ready, a lifeline in the chaos, a reminder of the team that had his back. "We're moving the summit." There was no gasp, just a beat of silence, the kind that comes when someone knows better than to question a decision, a trust built on years of collaboration. Lydia knew this tone, had heard it in boardrooms and late-night strategy sessions, a tone that meant Marcus had made up his mind and nothing would sway him. "Today?" she asked, her voice calm but focused, already shifting into problem-solving mode. "Right now," Marcus said, his tone leaving no room for doubt, a quiet command that carried the weight of his resolve. "You want to relocate 50 people with less than an hour's notice?" "Not want," he corrected, his voice firm, a quiet steel beneath the surface. "Need." Lydia exhaled, her mind already racing through logistics, her voice softening with understanding, a rare warmth breaking through her professionalism. "You want me to call the Grandview or the Sterling?" "Sterling," Marcus said, his decision final, a choice made not out of convenience, but out of principle. "Redirect every investor there. Make sure they understand this isn't a scheduling issue, it's a matter of principle. I'll explain more when we're set. Also, cancel the rest of our booking here, suites included. Charge the penalty to me personally if they refuse to release." Lydia's voice softened further, a quiet acknowledgement of the gravity of the moment. "Understood." Marcus ended the call, his reflection staring back at him in the lounge's dark window, the glass cool against his fingertips as he pressed a hand to it, a grounding touch in a moment of upheaval. He didn't feel triumphant, not yet. He felt tired of walking into rooms that saw everything but who he was, tired of the constant need to prove his worth in spaces that should have welcomed him with open arms, tired of the weight of a world that refused to see him. A soft knock broke the silence, the sound tentative, almost apologetic, a gentle intrusion into his solitude. Caleb stepped in, his brow raised, his usual easy smile replaced by a look of concern, his eyes searching Marcus's face for answers. "You want to run through slides?" he asked, his voice careful, as if he could sense the weight Marcus was carrying, a burden he wanted to share. Marcus shook his head, his movements slow, deliberate, a quiet resolve settling into his bones. "Change of plans." Caleb's eyebrow lifted higher, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes, a spark of anticipation. "Oh, we're leaving," Marcus said, his voice steady, a quiet determination that left no room for doubt. "I've already made the call." Caleb nodded slowly, understanding dawning like a sunrise, slow but inevitable, a shared understanding of what this moment meant. "They didn't even try to make it right, did they?" "Nope," Marcus replied, the word sharp, final, a quiet condemnation of the hotel's failure. "Want me to tell the board?" "I'll speak to them myself," Marcus said, his voice firm, a leader stepping into his power. "Just get the guests moving, and make sure no one thanks the hotel on their way out." Within minutes, Caleb was spreading the word, subtle nods, quiet whispers, his movements efficient but discreet, a master of understated coordination. "Emergency relocation," he told one group of investors, his voice low, reassuring, a calm presence in the chaos. "We've got a better setup a few blocks over," he assured another, his smile professional but firm, a quiet promise that everything would be okay. Lydia was on the phone with the Sterling, securing their backup venue, her voice a steady stream of instructions as she transferred AV equipment and rerouted catering, her efficiency a testament to the team Marcus had built. Marcus returned to the Oakwood room once more, gathering his notes and laptop, his movements methodical, each action a small act of reclaiming control, a quiet defiance in the face of disrespect. A hotel manager appeared, his face tight, a folder clutched in his hand, his posture stiff with the kind of nervousness that comes from realizing a mistake too late, a fear that he'd lost something irreplaceable. "Mr. Langston, I understand there was a mix-up at the front desk this morning," he said, his voice strained, an attempt at sincerity that fell flat, a hollow gesture in the face of Marcus's resolve. "I want to personally apologize. It was never our intention to offend you." "You didn't offend me," Marcus cut in, his voice calm but sharp, a blade wrapped in velvet, a quiet power that needed no volume to be felt. "You disqualified yourselves. This isn't about ego, it's about standards." The manager blinked, caught off guard, his hands tightening around the folder as if it could shield him from the truth, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and regret. "Can we make this right?" he asked, his voice almost pleading now, a desperate attempt to salvage what was already lost. Marcus zipped his laptop case, his eyes meeting the manager's, steady and unyielding, a quiet storm in his gaze. "You had your chance." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His silence a louder rebuke than any shout could be. The room, once buzzing with investors, was emptying fast, the sound of footsteps and murmured conversations fading into a hollow quiet, a testament to the power of Marcus's decision. Marcus exited through the same lobby where he'd been told to wait, the desk clerk watching him, her lips pressed tight, her eyes wide with a mix of confusion and fear, a silent witness to the consequences of her actions. A black SUV waited out front, the driver opening the door with a nod, a quiet respect that the hotel had failed to show. Marcus got in, his phone already ringing, the world outside blurring as the car pulled away, a new chapter beginning. At the Sterling, the new venue, the grand atrium sparkled with natural light, the high ceilings and glass walls creating a sense of openness that felt like a balm to Marcus's frayed nerves, a space that welcomed him without question. Staff greeted him like they'd been expecting him for weeks, their smiles genuine, their movements efficient, a stark contrast to the cold indifference of the previous hotel, a reminder of what respect looked like. Back at the original hotel, the lobby was unraveling, the air thick with panic, a chaos of their own making. The receptionist scrolled through her screen, her brow furrowed, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. "Sarah, the conference guests, they're leaving," she said into the phone, her voice rising, a note of desperation creeping in, a fear that she'd played a part in this disaster. Sarah, in the loading bay, froze, her clipboard slipping slightly in her hands, her heart sinking as the reality of the situation hit her. "What do you mean, leaving?" "I mean, people are checking out, canceling their keys. Some just walked out without saying anything." The receptionist replied, her voice cracking, the weight of the moment crashing down on her. In less than 20 minutes, the lobby's energy drained like air from a punctured balloon, the once bustling space now eerily quiet, a ghost of what it had been. Conference signage stood abandoned, the buzz of handshakes replaced by the faint hum of the air conditioning, a hollow sound that echoed the emptiness of their mistake. The manager's phone rang, the sound jarring in the stillness, a harsh reminder of the consequences unfolding. "Sir, the company has canceled all bookings, the suites, the Oakwood room, catering, everything," a staff member reported, her voice tight with urgency, her words a quiet condemnation. The manager blinked, his mind struggling to catch up, his heart pounding in his chest. "That's not possible. It's summit day." But it was possible, and it had just happened, a domino effect set in motion by their failure to see Marcus for who he was. Calls flooded in, the front desk clerk juggling multiple lines, her hands trembling as she tried to keep up, her voice rising with each new report. "This guest just left without notice," one voice said through the receiver, the words a quiet accusation. "They won't be paying for brunch. They said talk to Mr. Langston," another added, the name a bitter reminder of their mistake. At the Sterling, Marcus stood before a large projection screen, the room bathed in sunlight, the golden glow casting long shadows across the polished floor, a warmth that felt like a new beginning. He spoke slowly, his voice clear, without a trace of bitterness, each word chosen with care, a quiet strength emanating from him. "Before we begin, I want to thank you all for your flexibility," he said, his eyes scanning the room, meeting the gazes of the investors who now filled the space. Their faces a mix of curiosity and respect. I know the change of venue was unexpected, but I believe where we gather says a lot about what we value. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, a quiet wave of support that bolstered Marcus's resolve, a reminder that he wasn't alone in this fight. I chose that previous hotel for its reputation, its service, its proximity to your offices. But this morning, I was reminded that a polished lobby and a 5-star rating don't guarantee respect. He paused, letting the words settle, the silence in the room a canvas for his next statement, a moment of reflection that drew the audience in. I was asked to wait outside, twice, by staff who never once asked my name. I parked my own car. I reintroduced myself. I explained who I was. But in that space, none of it mattered. A few jaws tightened, heads shook, the tension in the room palpable as the investors processed his words, their expressions a mix of shock and understanding. Some of you might be surprised by this, Marcus continued, his voice steady, a quiet strength that filled the room. Others, less so. But I don't believe in yelling. I don't believe in dragging people down to prove a point. I believe in moving forward. And today, we're doing just that, somewhere that sees us, hears us, and treats our business with the seriousness it deserves. The crowd applauded, not out of pity but respect, the sound a warm wave that washed over Marcus, easing the tension in his shoulders, a quiet validation of his choice. Caleb watched from the back, arms crossed, a proud smile tugging at his lips, his eyes shining with a quiet admiration, a shared pride in what they'd accomplished. Meanwhile, at the first hotel, the conference signage was being dismantled, the letters peeling off the wall with a faint ripping sound, a physical manifestation of their loss. Maintenance staff wheeled away untouched coffee urns, the bitter aroma lingering in the air, a reminder of the event that never was, while catering teams stood idle, their aprons pristine, unsure whether to plate the food, their faces a mix of confusion and regret. The manager stared at a formal notice from Langston Innovations, terminating their agreement effective immediately. No lawsuit, no threats, just a clean break and a heavy cost. A document that felt like a death knell. He called the general manager, his voice hollow, the words sticking in his throat, a bitter taste on his tongue. "We lost the event," he said, the admission a weight he couldn't shake. "How?" "The guest we didn't recognize. He was the event." The day settled into late afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the street, the golden lights softening the harsh edges of the city, a quiet beauty in the fading day. Marcus sat in the back of the SUV, his suit jacket folded beside him, his tie loosened, the open collar of his shirt a small rebellion against the day's formality, a moment of vulnerability in a day of strength. Caleb sat next to him, scrolling through emails on his tablet, the blue light casting a faint glow on his face, a quiet focus in his movements. "You sure you don't want me to write a public statement?" Caleb asked, his voice cautious, his eyes flicking to Marcus, a concern that spoke of their shared history. "People are already posting. Someone from Carter & Sons took a video of you walking out." Marcus shook his head, his movements slow, deliberate, a quiet resolve in his posture. "Let them talk. I'm not here to go viral." He leaned back, the engines hum a steady backdrop to his thoughts, a quiet rhythm that grounded him, a moment of peace in the storm. Outside, the world carried on. Teenagers skateboarded on the sidewalk, their laughter sharp and carefree, the wheels of their boards scraping against the pavement, a sound that felt distant, otherworldly. A woman in a yellow scarf helped her elderly mother into a small bakery, the bell above the door jingling softly, a reminder of life's simple joys. But inside the car, there was a weight, a heaviness that pressed against Marcus's chest, making each breath feel like a conscious effort, a quiet battle against the emotions threatening to spill over. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said, not looking up, his fingers pausing on the tablet screen, his voice soft, tentative. "Go ahead," Marcus replied, his voice soft, almost weary, a fatigue that went beyond the physical. "Why didn't you just go off on them? They deserved it." Marcus didn't answer immediately, his gaze drifting to the window, the city a blur of motion and color, a canvas for his memories. "When I was 20, he began, his voice soft, the words coming slowly, as if he were pulling them from a deep well, a place he rarely visited. I walked into a small tech firm in Oakland for my first real internship interview. I'd spent weeks preparing, my resume was polished, my GPA was a 3.9. I wore my only suit, a hand-me-down from my uncle, the sleeves just a little too short, the fabric a little too thin, the kind of suit that made me feel like an imposter even before I walked through the door. He paused, his fingers tracing the edge of his seat, the leather cool under his touch, a grounding sensation in the midst of his memories. The receptionist looked me up and down and asked if I was there to fix the copier. I smiled, said no, and sat in the waiting area for 3 hours, the plastic chair hard against my back, the air conditioning too cold, making my hands tremble, my heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear. They never called me in. They forgot I was there. I could have made a scene, demanded to be seen, but I didn't. I left, took the bus home, the city lights blurring through the window as I fought back tears, the weight of their dismissal a heavy burden on my young shoulders. I cried in my room that night, not because I didn't get the job, but because I realized no amount of preparation could change how they saw me. Caleb looked over, his expression soft, a quiet empathy in his eyes, a shared understanding of the pain Marcus had carried. "But you didn't stop there," he said, his voice gentle, a quiet encouragement. "No," Marcus replied, a faint smile tugging at his lips, a glimmer of pride breaking through the pain. "I applied to 30 more companies. The 31st one hired me. A tiny startup in a basement office, the kind of place where the coffee machine was always broken and the Wi-Fi barely worked. That's where I wrote my first app, the one that got Langston Innovations off the ground." Marcus rubbed his hands together, the memory of that day still sharp, like the sting of a paper cut, a quiet ache that never fully faded, a scar on his soul. He glanced at Caleb, his voice quieter now, almost a whisper, a confession he rarely shared. "I spent years thinking if I just achieved enough, degrees, money, suits, people would stop making those assumptions. That success would speak louder than their biases." He looked out the window again, the city a blur of motion and color, his voice heavy with a truth he'd carried for too long, a burden he'd learned to bear. "It doesn't." Caleb nodded, the weight of those words settling between them, a shared understanding that needed no further explanation, a quiet solidarity in the face of a world that often refused to see them. "But this wasn't just a receptionist," Caleb said, his voice low, a note of frustration creeping in, a shared anger at the injustice. "This was a whole hotel, a whole moment." "Exactly," Marcus replied, his tone firm, a quiet fire igniting in his chest, a resolve that had been forged in the fires of countless rejections. "That's why I left. Because I didn't need to prove anything to them. I needed the people watching to see what it looks like when you refuse to beg for respect you've already earned." Alone for a moment as Caleb stepped out to take a call, Marcus let his guard down, the facade of composure slipping like a mask he'd worn too long, a shield he could finally lower. His shoulders slumped, and he pressed his palms to his face, the weight of the day crashing over him like a wave, cold and relentless, a tidal force of emotion he could no longer hold back. What if he'd made the wrong call? What if the investors saw this as a sign of weakness, not strength? The doubt gnawed at him, a quiet whisper in the back of his mind, its voice insidious, persistent, a shadow that threatened to engulf him. He closed his eyes, the darkness behind his lids a small comfort, a brief escape from the storm, and for a moment, he was 20 again, sitting on that bus, the city lights streaking past like tears he wouldn't let fall, the weight of the world on his young shoulders. But then he thought of his father's words, spoken years ago over a cracked kitchen table, the smell of burnt toast lingering in the air, a memory that grounded him. "You can't force people to see you, but you can choose where you won't be invisible." Marcus straightened, his resolve hardening like steel, the doubt retreating as he opened his eyes, the world coming back into focus, a renewed determination in his gaze. He wouldn't let their blindness dim his light. The SUV stopped at a light, a billboard across the intersection flashing an ad for a tech incubator. Bright colors, bold promises, the kind of dream Marcus had once chased, a reminder of how far he'd come. Caleb slid back into the car, a small smile on his face, the tension in his shoulders easing, a quiet relief in his posture. "You ever think we'd be the ones running those things instead of applying to them?" he asked, his voice light, a welcome shift in tone, a moment of levity in a heavy day. Marcus smirked, the memory of his younger self fading into the background, a quiet pride taking its place. Every day, and it still doesn't feel real sometimes. They pulled up to the Langston Innovations building, its glass facade reflecting the fading sun, a quiet pride emanating from its sleek lines, a testament to the empire Marcus had built. The receptionist in their lobby waved, holding the elevator as they stepped inside, the doors closing with a soft ding, a quiet transition to the next chapter. As the elevator hummed upward, Caleb broke the silence, his voice thoughtful, a hint of curiosity in his tone, a question that had been lingering in his mind. You ever think about telling that story, the 20-year-old version? Maybe, Marcus said, his voice soft, reflective, a quiet contemplation of the past. Not for sympathy, but for clarity. Because people think this stuff happens now and then, one bad day, one rude employee. But it's never just one moment. It's patterns, repeated, sharpened, buried. He stepped off the elevator, briefcase in hand, his movements steady but his mind racing with the implications of what he'd done, a quiet uncertainty lingering in the background. The fallout was already spreading, though Marcus didn't know it yet. Whispers in boardrooms, emails exchanged in the shadows, a quiet storm gathering momentum, a ripple effect that would change the landscape. What would the investors think? Would they see his actions as a bold stand or a reckless move? The uncertainty hung over him like a cloud, a quiet tension that he pushed aside, focusing on the task at hand, a leader stepping into his power. By midweek, for other companies had canceled their bookings with the hotel, their messages curt, their decisions final. We've decided to move in a different direction. Inside those boardrooms, the conversations were pointed, the air thick with caution, a quiet reckoning unfolding. You hear what happened with Langston's team? One executive asked, his voice low, his eyes scanning the room, a note of caution in his tone. Yeah, another replied, his tone grim, a quiet acknowledgement of the risk. We don't need that kind of risk tied to our name. What's the backup venue? The hotel scrambled to repair the damage. A regional sales director emailed Langston Innovations, offering free bookings, executive suites, even dining credits, a desperate attempt to salvage the relationship, a plea for forgiveness that fell on deaf ears. The offer didn't make it past Lydia, her loyalty to Marcus unwavering, her resolve as strong as his. She read it, her lips pressing into a thin line, marked it as handled, and moved on, a quiet dismissal of their empty gestures. Marcus never responded, his silence a louder rebuke than any words could be. Trust like that couldn't be bought back with discounts. It wasn't a billing issue. It was a betrayal of values, a failure that cut too deep to repair. Word spread to media circles, the story taking on a life of its own, a quiet wildfire spreading through the industry. A small tech outlet published a timeline of the incident, detailing the relocation, the silence that followed, the ripple effect that no one had anticipated, a story that resonated far beyond the walls of that hotel. That story found its way into inboxes, text threads, and happy hour conversations, where young black professionals toasted to Marcus Langston, not because he'd clapped back, but because he hadn't needed to, his quiet strength a beacon for those who'd felt unseen. Sometimes, the strongest move isn't slamming the door. It's walking away like the room never deserved you in the first place, a quiet exit that echoes louder than any shout, a lesson in power that reverberated through the industry. Back at Langston Innovations, the boardroom was quiet, the air thick with anticipation, a tension that spoke of the stakes at hand. Marcus sat at the head of the table, flanked by his senior staff and 3 partners from a venture capital firm in Portland, their expressions a mix of curiosity and respect, a quiet acknowledgement of the man before them. An investor cleared his throat, his voice breaking the silence, a note of curiosity in his tone. We heard about the switch, he said, his tone careful, probing, a question lingering in the air. People are still talking about it. Marcus leaned back, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp, assessing, a quiet confidence in his gaze. Is that a problem for you? Not at all, the man replied, a small smile tugging at his lips, a quiet admiration in his eyes. It told us more about your leadership than any slide deck could. Another investor nodded, his voice firm, a quiet respect in his tone. It's rare to see that kind of control under pressure. That's where trust comes from. Later that evening, Marcus walked the office floor, stopping at a whiteboard covered in diagrams and sticky notes. The scribbles a testament to the team's relentless innovation, a reminder of why he'd fought so hard to build this space. Caleb was there, sipping coffee from a chipped mug, the steam rising in lazy curls, a quiet moment of normalcy in a day of upheaval. "You see the write-up?" he asked, his voice casual but his eyes bright with interest, a shared pride in their accomplishment. "I did," Marcus said, his tone neutral, his gaze fixed on the whiteboard, the equations a quiet comfort. "They left out the part where the valet ignored you." "They always leave something out," Caleb replied, a wry smile on his face, a quiet acknowledgement of the media's selective storytelling. "But the ones who need to know, they got the message." Marcus looked at the whiteboard, his voice soft, reflective, a quiet promise to himself and his team. "When we built this place, I didn't want it to be flashy. I didn't want people to walk in and feel impressed. I wanted them to feel seen. That's the difference." The next morning, Marcus stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, a mug of black coffee warming his hands, the bitter taste grounding him, a quiet ritual in a world of chaos. The sky was a muted gray, the kind that made the world feel distant and still, a quiet canvas for his thoughts, a moment of peace in a storm. A soft knock came at the door, the sound tentative, respectful, a gentle intrusion into his solitude. "Come in," he said, not turning around, his eyes still fixed on the city below, the streets a distant hum of life. A young man stepped in. Nathan Carter, mid-20s, a junior analyst at Langston Innovations, his posture hesitant, a folder clutched in his hands, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and uncertainty. "You said you wanted to meet?" Nathan asked, his voice soft, unsure, a young man seeking guidance. Marcus turned, nodding, and gestured to the chair across from him, his movements calm, inviting, a quiet welcome. Nathan sat, setting the folder on his lap, his fingers fidgeting slightly, a nervous energy in his movements. "I heard what happened at the hotel," he said, his voice tentative, his eyes flicking to Marcus and then away, as if he wasn't sure he had the right to ask, a young man grappling with the weight of the story. "Some of us were talking about it in the break room yesterday." Marcus let the silence stretch, not uncomfortable, just steady, a space for Nathan to gather his thoughts, a quiet encouragement to speak. "I guess I just wanted to ask, how do you not let it get to you? How do you stay calm when it's that obvious?" Marcus smiled faintly, a small, knowing smile that held years of experience, a quiet wisdom in his gaze. "You think I stayed calm?" Nathan paused, his brow furrowing, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "Didn't you?" "No," Marcus said, his voice soft but firm, a quiet confession, a moment of vulnerability shared with a young man who needed to hear it. "I just didn't let them see it." He set his coffee down, his gaze steady, his eyes meeting Nathan's with a quiet intensity, a mentor passing on a hard-earned lesson. "You know what they saw when I walked into that hotel? A man standing where they didn't think he should be. Nothing else mattered. Not the work, not the contracts, not the conference. Just their own picture of what power looks like and who doesn't fit it." Nathan leaned forward, his eyes searching, a hunger for understanding in his gaze, a young man eager to learn. "So why not confront them? Why not tear into them and let the world see?" "Because the world already sees," Marcus said, his voice steady, a quiet wisdom in his words, a lesson forged in the fires of experience. "That's not the problem. The real fight isn't about proving anything to them. It's about teaching the people who come after us that you don't need their approval to make moves. You don't need permission to belong." Nathan nodded, the words sinking in, their weight settling into his bones, a quiet shift in his perspective taking root. "You handled it with class," he said, his voice soft, a note of admiration in his tone, a young man inspired by the man before him. "If it were me, I don't know." "That's the thing," Marcus replied, his voice warm, encouraging, a mentor guiding a protege. "You don't have to know. You just have to remember this. Never trade your composure for someone else's ignorance. If they misjudge you, let them. But make sure the space you're building, your company, your name, your team, never makes anyone else feel like they don't belong there." Nathan sat back, the weight of the advice heavier than he'd expected, a quiet transformation unfolding within him, a lesson he'd carry forward. That's what it means to lead. Marcus said, his voice firm but warm, a quiet strength emanating from him, a leader sharing his truth. You don't yell at the wall, you build a door somewhere else. They sat in silence for a moment. The hum of the city faint through the glass, a distant reminder of the world outside, a quiet moment of connection between mentor and mentee. Then Marcus tapped the folder Nathan had brought, his tone shifting to business, a gentle nudge back to the present, a reminder of the work that still needed to be done. What's in here? Oh, right, Nathan said, snapping back to work mode, his voice brighter now, a renewed energy in his movements. New proposal from the analytics team. We made some changes based on your notes last week. Marcus flipped it open, scanning the first page, his focus sharp, a quiet reminder of the leader he was, a man who could balance principle and pragmatism. Good. Let's meet with the team this afternoon. Nathan stood to leave but paused at the door, his hand on the knob, his voice soft but sincere, a young man changed by the moment. Thank you, he said, his eyes meeting Marcus's for a brief moment, a quiet gratitude in his gaze. For what? Marcus asked, his tone gentle, curious, a mentor seeking to understand. For showing us how to move without ever lowering yourself. Marcus gave a quiet nod, a small smile tugging at his lips, a quiet pride in the impact he'd had, and Nathan left, the door closing softly behind him. Outside, traffic moved steadily, the world oblivious to the shift that had just happened, the quiet lesson in resilience that had taken root, a moment that would ripple outward in ways Marcus couldn't yet see. But those who'd noticed, they wouldn't forget. This wasn't just about one man and one hotel. It was about all the rooms people walk into where someone looks up and sees only half the story, a universal truth that resonated far beyond the walls of that office. Marcus's quiet stand rippled outward, a lesson in power that didn't need a raised voice to be heard, a testament to the strength that lies in silence, in action, in walking away with dignity intact. It was about the quiet ways strength can speak, through action, not reaction, through choices that echo louder than words. It was about rewriting the rules without ever touching the pen they tried to hand you, a quiet revolution that changed the game. His story became a beacon for those who'd felt unseen, a reminder that you don't have to beg for a seat at the table. You can build your own, a space where everyone is seen, heard, and valued. And in that act, Marcus showed the world what true leadership looks like, not in the noise, but in the silence that follows when you walk away with your head held high, a legacy of resilience that would inspire countless others. Take a moment to reflect. What's a space in your life where you felt unseen? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. We're reading every single one, and your experience might inspire someone else to find their own strength, to build their own door where a wall once stood. Let's build a community of resilience together, a space where every voice matters, where every story is heard. This story isn't just Marcus's. It's a mirror for all of us, a reflection of the battles we fight, the spaces we navigate, the strength we find within ourselves. It's about the courage to stand tall when the world tries to shrink you, the resilience to keep building when others tear down, and the hope that comes from knowing you're not alone, that there are others who've walked this path and emerged stronger. At Daily Narrated Stories, we're committed to bringing you life-changing tales like this, stories that challenge, uplift, and inspire, stories that remind us of the power we hold within. Marcus's journey shows us that power isn't always loud, but it's always felt, a quiet force that can move mountains, change minds, and rewrite the rules. And that's a lesson worth carrying forward, a truth worth sharing. If Marcus's story moved you, if it made you rethink the way you carry yourself in spaces that weren't built for you, don't let this moment slip away. Hit that subscribe button right now to join Daily Narrated Stories for more powerful narratives that spark change, stories that will challenge you, inspire you, and move you to action. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and comment below with your thoughts. Time's ticking, and your voice matters. Let's keep rewriting the rules, together, today, because the world needs more leaders like Marcus, more stories like this, more moments of quiet strength that change everything.